Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the fourth Women's Business Leadership in Tech Conference. I regret I can't be with you live, but I'm happy to be here today virtual. For the past 4 years, we've been partnering with Columbia Business School to make this conference happen because we recognize both the role we can collectively play in expanding access to opportunity for women and minorities in tech. We acknowledge how far we still have to go. Vista works at the intersection of technology and finance, both sectors that too often fail to represent the diversity of this great country. That failure to represent is no mere cosmetic feature. It is both a cause and a symptom of the broader inequality that is the root of so many of the societal changes we face today. Left unchecked, in a world of haves and have-nots, new developments in technology can serve to intensify inequalities and exacerbate biases. However, technology also serves to disrupt. And where there's disruption, there's an opportunity to change. No better example of this kind of disruption exists than the challenges that we faced over the past year. In the face of novel problems presented by the coronavirus pandemic, technology has often been the solution, allowing our industries and workforce to adapt in ways that previously would not have been possible. A little over a year ago, when offices, businesses, and universities closed their doors practically overnight, we found that by leveraging technology, we could continue to do business, learn new subjects, engage with family, friends, and loved ones, and even attend conferences like this one, all the while protecting ourselves and each other. The disruption caused by this pandemic has also served to help reimagine a more inclusive form of work. In an era where women continue to bear most of the burden of childcare, remote work has allowed many to participate in the workforce who might have otherwise been excluded. It's been a boon to would-be workers who previously would have struggled to relocate in search of opportunity. Preconceived notions of what employment should look like have fallen by the wayside. And now it falls to us to decide which path our society takes next. We are coming out of the most difficult, frightening, and uncertain years in modern history, and we will long mourn all that we have lost. At the same time, we have a responsibility to take this moment to think about the world in which we want to live, and do the work necessary to make that world a reality. I'm thankful to Dean Maglaris and the Columbia Business School for hosting this event, and for each of you for engaging in this conversation. There's no better time to tackle these issues, and I'm honored to be doing this work with you all today. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us today. As Dean Maglaris said, my name is Betty Hung. I'm a managing director at Vista, and I have had the pleasure of taking part in this event in actually multiple years past. So I'm thrilled to be here with you virtually today, and I know this is going to be a great event. Just a logistical issue for those of you who want to ask questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll take questions at the end if we have time. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel today, which consists of 3 amazing CEOs that I've had the pleasure of working with as part of the Vista family. Amy Katamatsu is Chief Executive Officer of ComplySci, a leading regulatory technology company that provides governance, risk management, and compliance solutions to financial and professional services firms. Amy also sits on the board of Mouse, a national nonprofit that brings coding and STEM programs to underserved youth. She holds a bachelor's degree and an MBA from Harvard. Erin Nelson is Chief Executive Officer of Social Solutions, a company that provides performance management software to help social impact organizations measure and improve their outcomes. Between her work at Social Solutions and her background in renewable energy and computer technology, Erin has been inducted into the American Advertising Federation's Lifetime Hall of Achievement. She graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, and she also serves as an advisor to the Dean's Council there. Lisa Utzschneider is the Chief Executive Officer of Integral Ad Science, a global technology company that offers data solutions to create a safer, more effective advertising ecosystem. Lisa joined IAS as CEO in 2019, and she brings more than 20 years of digital advertising experience to the company and the role. Lisa also serves as a board member of the Ad Council and Bates College, where she holds a bachelor's degree from, and she also has a master's in public policy from NYU. So let's start with a little bit of background in your personal journeys. And let's go in order of introduction. So we'll start with Amy. Maybe tell the audience a little bit more about your background and what led you to pursue a career in technology.
Sure. Thanks so much, Betty. And thank you, Columbia, for inviting me to speak today. And I'm going to apologize in advance if I have a coughing fit. So if I go on mute, you'll know why in advance. But so to give you a little bit of background, I had a very traditional trajectory after undergrad. I went into investment banking at a company, if you go into the Wayback Machine, called DLJ, Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, which is now part of Credit Suisse and other things. But after being an investment banking analyst, I then went to Harvard Business School. And between my first and second years, again, a pretty traditional trajectory. I was a summer associate at SoftBank Technology Ventures, but that's really where, when you go to business school, the point, and for all of you who are at business school today listening in, the whole point of being at business school is really then to explore your opportunities and to think about the pivot. Where are you going to go next? And at the time, again, I organized one of HBS's first, what's called West Trek, so our trek to go out to Silicon Valley, and we visited hundreds of companies, including Yahoo, where Lisa was back in the day, and all of the other kinds of things. And so that was my kind of eye-opening moment of, this is something brand new. This is something where I can make a mark and I can be part of something which is going to be much bigger than myself in the future. And so really after business school, I went to go work with Bill Gross, who was the co-founder and chairman of Idealab, which is one of the OG incubators of the world, and was really able to spend a lot of time with him. And then I was hooked, and the rest is history. That's where I'll stop. We can talk about all of the things that I did beyond then, but that would get really super boring. But if you think about the pivotal point that took me to technology, that was it.
How about you, Maren?
So I am a hardcore marketer, and my first job out of undergrad was at Procter & Gamble. And I was there for several years. And after being at Procter & Gamble and loving it, I actually moved into management consulting. And it was in management consulting where I really realized the opportunity for some of these scalable solutions to really impact the world. So some of my clients were in telecom, some of them were in technology, and I was just really intrigued about the opportunity. I was really fortunate. In the late 90s, I joined Dell. And when I joined Dell, it was a $6 billion company. And when I left Dell 11 years later as their CMO, it was a $65 billion company. So I was able to experience this extraordinary boom and growth in technology. And the part about being there that I really loved, just like Amy said, was realizing the scale impact that technology could have and how it could really transform industries, families, communities, countries. And after I was in tech there, I just decided I never wanted to leave it. And so I've been in software ever since.
And Lisa, how about you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I also had a pivot similar to what Amy was saying. As Betty mentioned, I got a master's in public policy at NYU, and I thought I'd spend a career in the not-for-profit world. So I started early in my career grant writing for some of the largest NGOs. And what I found was I was connecting better with the board of directors and learning more about the corporate world. So my pivot happened when I joined Microsoft 20 years ago and just fell in love with technology, the power of technology, and leveraging all things tech and data for customers, and then spent 20 years in tech working for large global companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Yahoo until I landed at IAS 2 years ago.
So you guys have all had fascinating journeys. Maybe could you speak a little bit about some of the challenges that you've overcome in that journey and what you might have learned from them? Amy, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, I mean, I think that the biggest thing for me is really, if I look back on my career, ever since being an investment banker, I've never had a job that had an actual job description. To be honest with you, I've had to get really, really comfortable with the unknown and living in this kind of area of ambiguity is what I would call it, and trying to figure out what your next goal, what your next thing is going to be, and always asking what else. And I think that it was really unnerving at the beginning, because when there was not such a thing as product management, which was when I was a product manager, the first product manager at one of my first technology companies so many years ago, you really had to then define what are the walls related to that. And so I think part of this is really trying to come up with what is success for yourself and ensuring that you bring the stakeholders along. And number two was also recognizing when you do and when you do not have sponsorship. When you don't have sponsorship within an organization and you're not finding those people who are going to give you those stretch opportunities and take risks on you, it is so hard to be successful and to feel good about the work that you're doing. And it's really important then for you to recognize maybe this is not the place for me. And I think that was part of, for me, that is it me, is it them, is it just the culture? I think you have to think about those things always as you evolve in your career. And I've been very, very lucky to have worked at many places where I have found that kind of sponsorship and have sought it out and have followed CEOs who have given me that kind of sponsorship at multiple companies. And so, I'll leave it at that, but definitely one of the things that I would definitely say was a tough not to recognize when you both had and had not that kind of sponsorship and what to do after that.
I'd say the toughest challenge that I experienced early in my career was I couldn't find anybody that looked like me. So I've been an outsider from day one. My parents didn't go to college. I'm the first of my family to have gone to college. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a fancy second degree. I came to a company from a state university. And so I always felt like I didn't quite belong in the places that I was. And when I joined Procter, it was a wonderful place. And it did have a couple of women leaders that I could look up to, but there weren't that many. And so I remember that I was always seeking somebody that looked like me, had a background like me, had experience as I did, and it was hard to find. And as a result, it wasn't as easy for me to figure out what should my voice be? What should my posture be? How should I act? What should I do? And it was later on throughout a number of years that I realized you sometimes don't get to just follow somebody that's been there before you, and you got to figure it out on your own. And so that's what I've spent a lot of the last 30 years doing, is kind of sometimes without a roadmap, just figuring out what's authentically really me and who I am.
Lisa.
Sure. I would say one of my biggest challenges early in my career is spending 20 years in technology, working out of New York City and always flying to the West Coast for companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Yahoo. And this is before days of Zoom, right? So it was good old-fashioned conference calls where I was typically the only woman dialing into the call, the only woman in the meeting. I've probably done thousands of conference calls like that. And the thing I discovered early in my career is the importance of finding your voice and speaking up and showing up prepared, very well prepared to meetings, and making sure that you don't get interrupted, no one talks over you. For years, that would happen, unfortunately. And so I found the courage to reach out to often male colleagues who were doing it. I'd call them after the call and just say, hey, heads up, could you please give me space in the meeting next time? Or I'd do it real time in the room. And what I learned is it's like working out and developing a muscle. And you get to the point that it's second nature. You just don't let anyone speak over you or interrupt you, and finding your voice early. And I think especially now that we're all working remotely, living on Zoom, everyone has a seat at the table in Zoom, and making sure that you speak up early, and speak up often.
So that's a perfect segue actually into my next question, which is, and maybe Lisa, you can start now because that's such a it's such a lead in, but how would you describe your management style today, and how has it changed over the course of your career? And then maybe also speak a little bit about like what leaders you've had who've influenced that.
Sure. I'm a huge believer in leading the way I want to be led, managing the way I'd like to be managed. So I allow for a long leash. I'm a huge believer in creating a culture where every employee can realize their potential, investing in things like training, learning, and development. And I think by doing that, and again, doing it and ensuring that employees, both early in their career, new employees, managers, that they have the opportunity to develop their skills, both professionally and personally, because we spend a lot of time working, and it's important to develop those skills. The second thing I'm a huge believer in is building a succession plan early across your entire leadership team so that you're identifying high potential employees early in their career. And also, one of my mentors and bosses at Microsoft, one thing she did is, I remember it vividly, that I had just led and hosted a 2-day conference. It was my first big conference with the whole, it was back then, it was the ad operations org that I rebuilt. And after the conference, I remember she pulled me aside and said, you know, you've got what it takes. You know, you've got what it takes to lead a global organization. The sky's the limit for you. And having her pull me aside and we had that moment together has always stayed with me. And it's so important as leaders that we take the time with employees who are demonstrating high potential, making a huge impact on the organization. And we tell them that, like we tell them the sky's the limit for you. Or if you've identified who your successor is, you tell them, right? And you put together a plan to train them and develop the skills that they need so that when you move on to your next role, you have a successor in place that you can transition the business to seamlessly.
Wow, that's huge. That's very impactful. Erin, what do you think?
You know, like Lisa, I also appreciate and today have a very strong focus on development because I was on the other side too. And there were people in my career that provided me opportunities and gave me the boost that I needed and told me to take opportunities that I was just convinced I didn't have the skills to successfully achieve. And so I do a lot of that myself, and I spend a lot of time individually mentoring and developing, building long-term development plans. One of the things that I do a lot with my team is work with them on envisioning, like, what does it look like 10 years from now? And how do you start thinking about the ladder and the jungle gym and all the ways we talk about it of experiences that you need to achieve that? That's a really valuable focus for me. And I'd say that the thing I'm most proud of after 30 years of being in business is not any of the business results, but looking at people that have been on my teams that are CMOs and CEOs and CGOs and doing extraordinary things. You know, later in my career, I would say I began to become a more empathetic leader. That was not a part of my toolkit early on. And in fact, it was opposite. I mean, I did everything possible to be like the tough girl and to not show empathy and to not show weakness because I just felt like it made me look like I didn't belong. But later on, I've recognized that's actually a really valuable skill to have as a human being. And it does help people feel comfortable and included and accepted, and it helps them thrive and do their best. And so that's been something that I've quit putting in the back burner, and I've allowed it just to come out as it really does exist in myself.
Well, I can say Lisa and Erin, both of you have really inspiring commentary, and I'm taking that idea of envisioning with me back. I love it. And I think building on Lisa's comments with regards to pointing out potential in other people that they might not see themselves, I think it's important for us, not just within our own organizations, but also, so in my work with my nonprofit Mouse, we work with underserved youth. And I think I just remember back to, and Erin, you know, I have a similar background. My mom was a hairstylist. My dad never went to college, you know, but there was a woman who came to my high school and said, you should apply to Harvard. Literally, had she not just said those words, I probably would not have applied. I'm from California. There's a great UC and Cal State system. I would have just checked all the boxes and I would have gone to a great UC school, just like everybody else I know. But she came in and she said, you should apply to Harvard. And I had no intention of doing that before she did it. And I think that, I don't even know what her name was. I really feel like I need to go back to her and say thank you. But I think that you don't realize the impact that you have if you just say something to people, and it sparks an idea in their head, because I think that, you know, this adage of you can't be what you can't see is so true. And sometimes people can't see for themselves the future and envision the future that you see for them. And so it's so important. But to answer one of the questions that you had asked, Betty, about kind of leaders who have influenced you, there was a CEO that I had, David Eisner, who I moved over across the country for him to work with him a second time. And actually it was my husband who was like, you know, yeah, why don't you go? And we were married at the time. And I was like, well, we just bought a house. Why would we do this? You know, there was a lot of debate. And he was just like, you know, we worked for a lot of people over time. And he was someone who trusted you, gave you lots of incredible assignments, and I think just believes in you. So you should go and go see. And so he stayed on the West Coast. I went to the East Coast, and we did, you know, kind of a lot of air flying at the time to see each other kind of on the weekends, you know, a few times a month or something else. But I think it was one of the biggest things that I could have done. And what he taught me specifically, you know, before I think servant leadership was popular, he was the embodiment of servant leadership in all of the things that he did. And we ended up exiting that company, and we sold to another company. And even just some of the things that he had put in place at the exit of that organization for employees who were inside of the organization to put together kind of incredibly kind of generous severance packages and other kinds of things that you don't really think about until you're in that seat, until you're in the CEO seat of what you need to do for the rest of the organization. Because it was certainly not making him wealthier by putting this money into, you know, on the side for future use and for bonuses and other kinds of things. But I just learned so much being able to ride alongside him. And so, you know, I can be, you know, only so thankful. Like I still will thank him and do whatever I need to. Anytime he picks up the phone and calls me and asks me for a favor, I will 100% do that, because, you know, I think he brought me along on this incredible journey. And so hopefully I can do that for somebody else.
So Amy, one of the other things you just said in that answer was about how you can't be what you can't see. So can you talk a little bit about why you think it's important to be able to see and work with, you know, diverse as well as women leaders within both your company and your broader network?
100%. So I would say two things. One is, it was so interesting. I just had a senior woman come in as a VP into our organization, and she made this comment to me, which was like, I was blown away by the interview process. I had 5 people who I interviewed with, 4 of which who were women, one of whom was a man, but he was really just a meet and greet. He really wasn't somebody who was interviewing me for this. And it was just such a different experience. And if I think about the different opportunities I had, say if you had the same kind of economic package, I would have chosen this, or I did choose this because of the fact that I had this different experience. And so having that in your own pipeline, in your own organization, building up that diversity just does matter, because it attracts people. I've been told many, many, many times about the fact that because I have been there, or if you look at my own leadership team, you know, I've got 3 women, including myself, on the leadership team. 4 out of 7 are diverse. And so, you know, I just think that just builds on itself and is really powerful. And externally, you know, I mentored through Mouse this young woman who was coming. She was in the foster care system. She had so much promise, and she just didn't realize it about herself. And when I first had a conversation with her, she told me, so I'm thinking about college, but I don't know what I can afford because, you know, I'm in the foster care system and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I don't know what came over me, but I just blurted out, you have an opportunity, which is much bigger than you know. You need to apply and get into the best college you can possibly get into, and then we will find the money. for you to go out and do that. That should not be the thing that restricts you from going to the best college you can possibly get to. And I obviously was very passionate. I continue to be very passionate about that, but I hope that, you know, that encouraged her, that other people could see the kind of value and what she could bring to the table, and really then to push herself to go and find. And so she ended up going to UVA on a full ride scholarship and all this other kind of stuff. And it's just been like really amazing to see. And it's those individual things that you can do with people kind of in your network. They don't need to be your intern. It could just be somebody that you meet who is promising on the street, but you need to tell them, because these students are all huge consumers of technology. They just don't imagine themselves to be drivers and builders and developers of technology, but they can be. As all of us here, like none of us are pure technology backgrounds in terms of hard code coding and other kinds of things. And that's what students think that they have to be in order to be in a technology company. And it's not true. There's so many ways to participate in the technology ecosystem. So I'll stop there because I could go on for a long time.
Wonderful though, Amy, what you've done. Erin, what about you? Like this concept of, you know, need to see in order to be.
I think there's three big reasons why having a diverse organization and diverse leadership matters. The first I learned really early on when I was back at Procter & Gamble, which is a significant majority of the purchasing in the world is done by women and diverse populations. And so in order to understand what it is that's going to want people to buy your product, having insight and having a broad appreciation for who they are is really helpful. The second is, like Amy said, I think being able to inspire others to be part of an organization, to develop themselves because they actually can see people in leadership positions throughout is really critical. And that's where the talent pipeline comes in. And in the war for talent that we have right now, with the choices people have, they need to look at a company where they look and say, I can actually see that they value this. And our organization has got a lot of younger folks that are very kind of socially progressive and very aware. They wouldn't come to a company that didn't have a commitment to DE&I. And then the third, frankly, I just think you make better decisions when there's a lot of different perspectives and voices in the room. And that's not just gender diversity. It could be economic diversity, social diversity, racial diversity, neurodiversity, you name it. The more different perspectives you can have that can help you as a leader approach a business problem with a broader perspective and a more surround sound view, the better your decision making is going to be. So it's good for business and it's good for people.
Lisa, bring it
Sure.
home.
I would say, so a couple of things. I'm a huge believer, if you can't see her, you can't be her. But there are a few things as leaders and as a leader that I've tried to follow throughout my career and also try to lead by example. The first is minding the data. So it's just so important that as a leader, you're aware of the fact that you're paying equitably. You look at the data frequently, whether it's during the annual review process, mid-year review. I posted a piece last week on Fast Company sharing an example where years ago I was in a people review and you could just see the numbers and the women were being paid less, 10%, 5 to 10% less. And on the spot, I course corrected and made sure we were paying equitably. So that's the first thing, is always follow the data, look at the data, and scrutinize the data. Make sure you're creating an equitable environment for all employees. And second, I would say, is creating a culture of mentors and coaches and ensuring you're creating opportunities where anyone has the opportunity to speak up, to present. You know, a few examples at IES, we have a global live town hall every Thursday morning, and we've been running this town hall for a year since we've been working remotely. And any employee has the opportunity to volunteer, come in, present. They could talk about the impact they're making on the business. They could talk about an employee resource group they're involved in, how they're contributing in the community. So creating environments like that, opportunities to come into the senior leadership team and present, where again, creating environments where any employee regardless of gender, can come in and show what they're doing and how they're contributing to the business.
So those are great programs. I mean, I'm going to totally steal that for some of my companies that I work with, because I think encouraging, all different levels of people to actually have to present to the whole company about things that they're passionate about is phenomenal. Lisa, can you also maybe talk about, I think, some programs or ideas and actions that we as a group, other ideas that you have about how we can make a difference, and maybe some programs that you may have benefited from, in your career?
Sure, there are lots of programs. So one is internship program. I'm sure everyone in their companies also have summer internships, but that's something that we've invested heavily in so that students who are still in school can come. We now have 3 different sessions of internships at IAS. That's one great way to start cultivating talent, mentoring and coaching students while they're still in school. That's one. A second is a more formalized mentorship program, ensuring that your senior leadership team or all leaders within your organization are mentoring at least one employee in the organization. That's another way to ensure that you're coaching employees. So I'd say between the internships and mentoring programs.
Erin, thoughts on specific programs that you've either implemented or personally benefited from?
Yeah, the one that I can remember benefiting from very early in my career was something as simple as command skills training and presentation training. I remember very early, I was probably like 5 years in, and it was a simple class. And I look back now and there was like nothing magical about the content of the class other than making me very aware and present about what it means to command a conversation, command a situation, and command a room, because it doesn't come naturally to most people. And so I think providing everybody the tools to understand how to use their voices effectively and how to stand up effectively when they need to, that was really, really beneficial. And then mentoring programs, as Lisa just said, I've both benefited from and instituted. I think they work best, to be frank, when they're not that organized, when it's not like, let me match you up with somebody. But what we've always, I think, benefited from is creating a structure that says, if you have the passion to seek this mentor support, this is the role that you need to play and how you need to do it. And finding folks that raised their hands and said, I want it and I'm going to work for it and I'm going to really cultivate this relationship. The folks that have taken part in that have really flourished well in their careers. So I feel like my job is making sure programs like that exist, but we don't force people into them. We allow people to move into them if they think that it's the right thing for them.
So I'll go. I think one of the things that I personally benefited from when I was in college was a program that still exists. It's back then it was called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, SEO. Now it's called Seize Every Opportunity. So they've rebranded. But I think the careers program puts people of color and women into places like financial services. So my investment banking kind of internship when I was an undergrad was through SEO. They put people onto the sales and trading side. They put people into alternatives and into law. There are just a lot of different programs that organizations like that are really blazing the trail for a lot of people, and certainly in financial services and law, and even in tech now they have expanded to. And they work with kids who are in middle school and high school. And so I think there's a lot of investment in a lot of places like that certainly I benefited from personally. But I would say within organizations, the idea of mentoring, I think across not just women, but across the organization is super important. And part of the reason is because I don't also just want women to be mentors, right? You want a broad-based mentor group, both men and women. And I want everyone to be participating in the mentoring. And again, to Erin's feedback, I want that also to be much more driven by mentees, because ultimately it's part of the path of ensuring that mentees are thinking about, how do I drive my own career? How do I think about pushing myself forward? Because as mentors, and I know that all of you are probably mentors to lots of people, both formally and informally, it's exhausting. You have lots of your main job, you have a lot of other jobs. And so it is just much easier when also your mentees are thinking about how they want to utilize you in the best way possible and to get your feedback on certain things that they might be thinking about. So it's not really about the mentor guiding that person. It's really about facilitating and making sure that the mentee is really taking ownership of their own career and you helping them along that. And so I find that that has always been much more successful. And one of the things, just because we're still in quarantine and all still working from home, for us anyways, I just went back out to the company yesterday and I was like, I really miss the day-to-day interaction that I used to have with everybody in the office. And we did a little poll in our Slack channel, and I offered up things like office hours or coming to their group meetings, or the thing that really won out was lunches with Amy, which I'm like, why do they want to have lunch with me? But they've all voted for lunches with Amy. But part of it is that I want to know what all of them are up to, some of the details of their work, especially those people who would never sign up for a one-on-one office hour. Really, those are the people that we want to ensure that I'm hearing more. How can we spotlight those people? How can we give them a shout out at a town hall if they're shy and they don't want to come to the town hall to present or something else? And so there's just a lot of these things that I'm hoping to implement within the organization to help kind of create that kind of buzz and ensure that other people are aware of what everybody else is working on.
Those are all super powerful, and especially I like that idea of lunch with Amy remotely.
Oh, Betty, that's because you're going to volunteer to come to a lunch with Amy. It's coming to a Zoom near you.
Like, do people really eat at those things? People say like, let's do a virtual coffee meet. And
I'm
like,
not sure. Maybe that's the reason why it was so popular. They all thought that they were going to get delivered lunch. But I think I might need to sponsor now.
No, absolutely. So I guess shifting, I think this conversation is so interesting in terms of like actual tangible actions that people can take. In addition to sort of mentoring and sponsoring folks across all these different, all these different populations, employees and, people you meet on the street and friends and family and everyone else. Can you talk a little bit about, what strategies we can use to reduce barriers of entry and create like more of a culture of inclusion in our companies? Because obviously, one of the important parts of increasing diversity, at our companies, whether it's, as Amy, you mentioned, like gender, racial, socioeconomic, thinking, neurological, whatever it is providing these underrepresented populations with exposure and access to opportunity. So what can we do besides like demonstrating, having a diverse leadership team, for example, in an interview? What else can we do to reduce those barriers of entry for them?
Are you asking me first? Yeah. Oh, Erin, you want to go? Erin, go.
Okay. There's three things that I've seen that have worked really well. Obviously, one of them is this all starts with the pipeline, right? And identifying places, sometimes as early as high school, where students with high potential have paths to be able to develop skills, interview, become interns, and eventually become full-time employees of organizations. So I think those programs are really beneficial. As you mentioned, Betty, obviously having a broad interview panel and interview process to make sure that lots of points of views are assessed in that interview process is really valuable. But to be frank, I think the most important thing is ensuring that managers and employees understand how to ensure that any employee of any diverse background knows how to succeed. And so providing the right onboarding tools, providing the right tools for managers. There's this famous study, right, about what happened at a Silicon Valley tech company a few years ago when they went and hired just a ton of the best and brightest MBAs that were of diverse backgrounds. They came to the organization, there were dozens of them, and they weren't very successful. Now, what they learned was the issue actually wasn't the employees. The issue was that the managers didn't know how to manage those employees effectively and ensure that they had the coaching and the skills and the support and the confidence to succeed. And so I think as CEOs, it's really valuable for us to ensure not only is that employee being given tools and skills, so are managers. And they're also being really clear with what our expectations are and how they should lead in diverse populations and what that looks like. So it's a two-way street, but I think you can hire all the best people in the world, but if you don't ensure that their experience once they're there is phenomenal, then you've wasted a whole lot of energy and really hurt people in the process.
Lisa, thoughts?
Yeah, just to add on to what Erin said, because I agree on the pipeline and ensuring that you have a diverse pipeline. I think also it is critical to provide training programs for managers, for leaders, to be better equipped to create an inclusive culture for all employees, regardless of gender, race, socioeconomic background, that you're doing everything in your power as a leadership team to create an inclusive environment so everyone can show up at work every day, feel like they can realize their potential, and not to assume that managers know what to do, and also just make sure that you're constantly having very candid, transparent conversations about your work culture, about your company's culture, what's working, where do you need to refine, ensuring that you're creating a culture where feedback is a gift and you're always listening and learning and refining and course correcting.
I would agree with all of those things. And I think, this is a journey, we're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination, but I think also we did an exercise, and I don't think we realized it at that then, how much it would impact the organization, but we did a values exercise where we were trying to define, we'd gotten to the point where everyone kind of was like, well, everybody knows what the values were, but nobody really knows what the values were. So we were like, okay, we should create them as an executive team and say what our values are. And when we put those together, how can I help, Team Before Ego and Hungry for More, they were, kind of very reflective of this concept of what we are expecting out of people, and this idea of how can I help, of we're all in it together, and we really need to think about how you're helping not only your clients, which you were doing on a day-to-day basis, and really thinking about client advocacy, but internally, you cannot see somebody else drowning or confused or something else without saying, how can I help? How can I help you? How can we all bring ourselves up together? Because we're in it together, and we either win or lose together. And I think that changed. We changed the kind of the culture of the organization, but also then it became really stark as to who the people were not carrying the torch of the culture. And we had some really tough decisions to make on those people as well. And so I think that it was a good litmus test for us to then say, okay, how do we think about living those values and living our culture in order to make sure that we could be inclusive and to be a place where people of diverse backgrounds wanted to be. And so I think, again, definitely not at the top of our game here. There's still a lot where we have to move forward on, but I think kind of identifying those issues is part of the first step in that direction. And how can we encourage people individually with what they're doing personally outside of work? Because I think that a lot of times I would love to be able to say that ComplySci could donate to all of these causes and to do all of these things. We just can't. We're such a small company. And so part of it is also then challenging people to say, like, okay, what are you doing outside of the office? What can you do to help fill that part of your cup, externally, and help other people kind of come up? That's really important.
Thanks for that, Amy. So really quickly, we have just a few minutes left, and I do want to take a couple questions. So I'm going to speed round them. So I'm going to read out the question, and then I guess any one of you three jump in, but I don't think we have to all three answer each one. So let's see. Here's one from Terry Mendelson. What efforts are you aware of that are being made to integrate women who are re-entering the workforce mid-career? We have great experience, but we have gaps in our knowledge, including tech platforms, navigating corporate politics, being older than our colleagues. And so it can be tricky to insert ourselves. What can be done to smooth the transition? Any one of you?
You know, one of the things that I've experienced just in the last several years, because I've been fortunate enough to hire a number of women that have been out of the career force for, 10 or 20 years while they were raising families. And one of the things that I have noticed is people often undersell what skills they actually have, even though they're not manifested in the same way that mine be. And so being able to articulate, look, in the 20 years that I wasn't in a traditional job, this is what I did. This is how I made decisions. This is how I navigated. This is how I led. That's all so relevant. Now, whether you understand Slack or not, that is teachable and I don't care. But that whole notion about, drive and leadership and curiosity and learning and all of those things, that's really what you want to find. And so I think, being open in the interviewing process to identifying folks that don't fit a traditional background. I work really closely with our people leader to make sure that we don't have restrictions that are around what colleges you went to, how long you went there, what that looked like, because this experience can come in lots and lots of flavors. So if you are somebody that's been out of the workforce for a decade or more, what I would just suggest is you think about that time that you were away, the skills that you developed, put it on your resume very proudly. And don't make it seem like this is something I'm embarrassed about because I didn't have a traditional job. And then be able to talk about you and your personal capabilities and how you learn and how you lead and how you drive. And I think lots of employers, me included, would look at that and say, what a great hire. And when we've hired folks that have looked like that, they have been wonderfully successful as they've joined our organizations.
The only other thing I'll add to what Erin said is there are resources out there. For example, the Second Shift. Gina Hadley is a co-founder of the Second Shift. Another organization is We Are Rosie, where they are platforms and resources, especially for women who are entering back into the workplace. It's a fabulous place to network, to get suggestions and tips. I completely agree with Erin's point. You have nothing to hide. Just emphasize the skills and the strengths that you have and how you can make an impact in the business, in the workforce.
So we've had a couple questions from different folks asking about, how to find the right mentor, whether it's within their organization or outside of their organization, because people believe that that would make them more successful. And Amy, you spoke a bunch about sponsorship. So maybe you could comment about how one goes about finding the right mentor.
So I'll talk about, so when my company was acquired, I went from a company where I was the chief product officer at a 150-person company to McGraw-Hill / Standard & Poor's, which is 15,000 people at the time. And this wide sea of, holy crap, I don't know anybody in this organization. How does this organization work? All of these other kinds of things. And I think the biggest thing that I did that I do not regret doing is I just made meetings with many, many, many dozens of people across the organization to know more about them, but also then thinking about kind of the connections that you could make. And people will often, you will find a connection with people who want to be helpful, and especially if you're being mindful of their time and how you'd like to work with them. I often find that there will be a match that will become evident, but part of it is that you need to, often the right answer is, or the right question is not, will you be my mentor? It's less than that. It's more like, you're part of my network, let us continue. And when I have appropriate questions, let me reach out to you for those questions or how to navigate a particular issue or whatever have you. And then deeper relationships will happen over time. And I think part of it is understanding that you have to invest in that over time and really, to use those connections wisely. I don't know, Lisa or Erin, if you would say something else, but kind of was my approach in any event. I feel like it was relatively successful from that perspective.
Not something else, but I'd add to that, which is I think that being very specific and deliberate about why you're choosing the person you are and what you hope to gain from them is really valuable. Because I think if you can go into a relationship and say, Amy, I'd like you to be my mentor, and here's why I picked you. Here's actually what I hope that you can help me with. The other thing is, you know, as females, your mentor doesn't need to be a woman. It can be, and it's often great because that might be what you want help with, is help me figure out how to find my voice as a person of diversity. But it could be lots of other people. If you want to get better at a particular skill, at navigating stickier situations, they may or may not be somebody that looks like you. So I think just being very thoughtful about what you want to get from a person. To be frank, it's also helped me figure out who to say yes to. I'm sure that many people get asked by dozens and dozens of people, will you mentor me? And I love to do that. But the ones that work really well and the ones that I'm enthusiastic about are the ones that have got clear purpose and objectives. And I really do understand, like, I personally am actually going to make a difference. And so I want to help. I want to invest my time in that person.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to this, coming from Amazon, I'm a huge believer. Amazon, it was a 6-pager, but I'm a huge believer in writing a 1-pager or less. So, for example, if an employee says, hey, Lisa, I noticed we're trying to figure out this part of the business, or I have an idea on how to improve our culture or the employee work experience, write me a couple of paragraphs, and guess what? I'll set up a meeting with you, and then the coaching begins, right? So demonstrating that you're strategically thinking about the business, you have ideas on how to improve the business and the environment, and less of the, will you be my mentor and you figure out how you're going to coach me. More, we can have a strategic, thoughtful discussion about how to improve the company.
I also would say that it's that typically I don't have just one mentor. There's kind of like a network or lots of different people that I go to for different kinds of advice, whether they're a peer or they're a senior advisor, or even someone who is more junior who I might tap into. And, you know, it might be the case that someone comes to me because, let's say they just got pregnant and they just found out, and they want to think about, how do you have this conversation with their manager? And what was my experience, and how did I approach it, and what did I think about, you know? And so I think I might be an appropriate question for that, but not for other things. And so I think also then thinking about the constellation of people that you have access to. And oftentimes people are more than willing to have a conversation. You just need to ask.
Love it. Okay, well, on that note, I think we are out of time. I know the 4 of us could talk all day long. So thank you guys, Lisa, Aaron, Amy, for making the time for this. It's obviously super important, and appreciate your participation. And thanks to all the attendees for listening. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this event, and I'm sure it'll be a wonderful day. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.